Hi guys, someone requested an instructional video about the mandatos informales, informal commands. Um, so first I want to show you guys this chart that is not used in the book, but that I usually find helpful. And it's going to explain formal and informal commands together and compare them. It probably makes no sense right now, but hopefully by the end of this PowerPoint it'll be clear. So you can see that here we have our formal commands for usted, ustedes, and nosotros. And as we learned in the last chapter, you're going to use the opposite ending to form those commands. So if it's an AR verb, you're going to use an E. If it's an ER or IR verb, you're going to use an A. Here we have affirmative commands, meaning, hey, you, do something, and negative commands, hey, don't do something. We're going to use pronouns after the commands with affirmative and before the command with negative. So this chapter we're moving on to informal commands, which is when you ask, hey, you, informal, to do something or don't do something. And as opposed to the formal commands, the affirmative and negative are formed differently. So that's what we're going to get to today. So the formal commands, just as a review, again, it's the same form for affirmative and negative. And what you're going to do is you're going to start with the present tense yo form of the verb. Here we have mandar, yo mando, poner, yo pongo. That's what you start with. That's your base, and then you add the opposite ending. Mandar is an AR verb, so you're going to add an E. Usted mande, ustedes manden, you have to have the N, nosotros mandemos. If it's negative, it's exactly the same, except you're going to have a no. No mande, no manden, no mandemos. For a verb like poner, where you have the irregular yo present tense form, that's going to be your base. That's why we start with that. If there's an irregularity in the yo present tense, then you need to use it for your commands. For poner, it's an ER verb, so you're going to put an A at the end. If it's affirmative, ponga, negative, exactly the same, no ponga. So the mandatos informales, the informal commands, again, have a different form in the affirmative and the negative commands. So for the affirmative, let's start with that first. We're telling, hey, to do something, affirmative. The way you form that command, the book explains it as you use the third person singular in the present indicative. Well, that's pretty wordy. What I like to say is just use the to form, conjugate the verb for to in the present tense. So if it's mandar, you're going to say mandas. If it's hablar, hablas. And then just take off the S. That's going to be your to affirmative command. So for mandar, tu mandas, take off the S, and you're left with manda. That's your affirmative command for mandar. However, there's a group of irregular to affirmative commands. These are only for the affirmative to commands, these irregulars. And they go with, well, there's a little trick here. So they're ven for venir, di, decir, sal, salir, haz, hacer, ten, tener, ve, es, ir, pon, poner, se, ser. And this is a little mnemonic device. Ven, di, sal, haz, ten, ve, pon, se. Vin Diesel has 10 weapons, sort of with a German accent. I find it super helpful, and that will help you remember what the affirmative to irregular commands are. The informal negative commands are formed in a different way. So we're not going to use the present tense, take off the S form. Now we're going to use the opposite ending, just like we did with formal commands, and now there is an S. So for mandar, the opposite ending is an E because we have an AR verb, and we have the S because we're dealing with to. So tu no mandes. There are some irregulars that's explained in the book, some spell changers. You need to study these to make sure you use those correctly when the time comes. And then it gets a little bit more complicated when you try to add pronouns, direct or indirect object pronouns specifically. For the affirmative to commands, the pronouns go after the command. For the negative to commands, they go before. That's the basic rule. When they go after, they're just put at the very end of the word. It's all one word. So for mandar, right, if we have an affirmative to command, we conjugate that verb regularly for to mandas. You take off the S. You're left with manda. Now, if I want to say send it to me, and I have object pronouns, the order is always going to be indirect first, then direct. So if I'm sending what, direct object, lo, it, to who, indirect object, me. That's going to be our order. Manda me lo. You can read about why these accents are written in on these affirmative commands. Basically, when you start adding syllables to a word, it might change where the accent needs to be marked. Here's a website that explains that. For the negative to commands, the pronouns go before. So, and it's not all one word, they're separated. So here we have the negative to command for mandar, opposite ending with an S, mandes, and then we have the pronouns before. Don't send what, it, to who, me. No me lo mandes. No, indirect, direct, verb is the order. So here we have our chart again. Again, for the formal commands, that's for usted, ustedes, or nosotros. So we're telling, hey, you, formal, do something, or don't do something. Hey, you guys, do something, don't do something. Hey, us, which is strange, let's do something, let's not do something. For all of these forms, when it's affirmative, you use the opposite ending. If it's an AR verb, you use an E. If it's an ER or IR verb, you use an A. For a negative, you do exactly the same thing, except you have the word no in front of it. For the to commands, the informal commands, if it's affirmative, you first have to think, is it one of those Venn diécel irregulars? If it is, that's the form I'm going to use. So if I want to say, hey to, you, informal, come to the party, I'm going to say, ven a la fiesta. If I want to say, hey you, informal, say or tell the truth, I'm going to say, di la verdad. If I'm going to say, hey, to, informal, salir is to leave, let's say, leave my house, I'm going to say, sal de mi casa. If I'm working with a verb that is not one of the Venn diécel irregulars, how do I form the to informal affirmative command? I use the regular present tense and I take off the S. If the verb is vivir, how do you conjugate vivir for to? Tu vives, take off the S, vive. If the verb is hablar, tu hablas, take off the S, habla, etc. If it's a negative informal to command, it's formed differently. We use the same opposite ending, except we add an S. Just like here, we have the opposite ending with an N, opposite ending with a mos. Here we have opposite ending with an S because we're dealing with to as the subject. So if our verb is hablar, the opposite ending of hablar, since it's an AR, is an E. Add the S. I'm going to say no hables. Okay? And if we have any pronouns, any objects, direct or indirect object pronouns, if it's affirmative, we tack them to the end. If it's negative, we put them before. So your quiz, this is the format. Let's practice a couple questions. You're only going to be expected to use the direct object pronoun with the commands. You would not have to use double object pronouns, so that makes it a little bit easier. You're going to be given a question. Por ejemplo, número uno, compro el regalo para la profesora, which is basically asking, should I buy the gift for the teacher? And I want to say yes. Well, if I'm prompted yes, that means we're dealing with a affirmative command, okay? And we're dealing with informal here. So affirmative, informal, to command. How do we form that? Well, we go to comprar is the verb. It's an AR verb. We conjugate it for to. Tu compras. We take off the S. What are we left with? Compra. Then we have to identify, okay, by what? What is the direct object? By what? El regalo es masculino singular, so we're going to use el pronombre lo, and we put it at the end because it's affirmative. Número dos, traigo la ensalada a tu casa. Should I bring the salad to your house? Now we're set up for a negative command. Okay, well, our verb is traer. It's an ER verb. We're going to use the opposite ending with an S for a negative, which is traigas. What is our direct object pronoun? Well, bring what to the house? La ensalada es femenina singular. La is our direct object pronoun, and since we're dealing with a negative command, the pronoun goes before. So go ahead and practice with the rest of these examples and see if you can understand why these are the answers. Hopefully you guys found that helpful, and good luck on the quiz mañana, okay? Suerte. Bye-bye.